US President Joe Biden has made America's case to the world leaders and CEOs attending the APEC Summit. Biden has underlined that the US is committed to maintaining high standards in trade and partnerships that will benefit economies, and that they are not going anywhere as the US looks to build economic ties across the Pacific.
Decades, America's enduring commitment to the region has been a springboard that's enabled growth, transformative growth.
Now, fresh off his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Biden also told business leaders that the U.S. has no intention of cutting supply chains and effectively ending cooperation with China.
Let me be clear. We are de-risking and diversifying our economic relationship with the PRC, not decoupling. Not decoupling. We'll be firm, standing up for our values and our interests. And I was very straightforward, as he was with me yesterday. At the same time, on critical global issues such as climate, AI, counter-narcotics, where it makes sense to work together, we've committed to work together.
However, the Biden administration is busily trying to strengthen alliances with countries in the APEC region who are worried about Beijing's expansionist policies. A big plank in that platform is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity. It's a loose trade pact meant to bind together the United States and like-minded democracies such as Australia and South Korea. Now, Biden says that the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework has made substantial progress, but conceded during his remarks that there is still work to do.
In May of 2022, we came together in Tokyo to launch negotiations on this so-called framework. We still have more work to do, but we've made substantial progress. In record time, we've reached consensus on 3 of the pillars of the IPEF. I hate acronyms, but I apologize. We signed the first-of-its-kind supply chain agreement to help identify supply chain bottlenecks before they become the kind of disruptions we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Moreover, India, US and 12 other IPEF members also announced that the group is launching a critical minerals dialogue with the objective of strengthening supply chains and promoting the creation of clean energy jobs. Although India is not a member of the APEC, India was represented by the Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal, who was in attendance for the IPEF ministerial meeting.
The one thing that I observed in all my interactions with world leaders was that they're very, very much looking forward to greater engagement with India. They hold India in very high esteem as a nation whose voice matters. The respect that I got clearly demonstrated that almost all the world leaders are very fond of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Now, what could be Biden's message to these companies which are part of this pact? VOA correspondent Jessica Stone tells us more on that. Take a look.
Yeah, some very poignant and key messages from President Biden to all of the APEC CEO Summit attendees. Literally hundreds of businesses here represented from around the Pacific Rim, 21 member countries, of course, in APEC, 21 member economies, I should say. He had the main message: we need you, we want you, and already, he said, APEC nations have invested some $200 billion in the U.S. economy, and he asked them to continue considering the U.S. economy as a worthwhile investment. He also had another main message, and that is that the U.S., he said, is a good partner and wants to continue being a good partner to the Pacific Rim nations. That's really key here because, of course, there has been doubts in the past about the U.S. staying power in the region, particularly when U.S. presidents have not attended APEC summits or the East Asia Summit, for example. And so it's a really key thing for him to express, particularly also because of the two wars that the U.S. is involved in, the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. So when it comes to those questions, the president definitely speaking to those that would say he might have difficulty with all of the balancing necessary for that. Another thing that I think is important to point out about the president's remarks today here in San Francisco is that he spoke to the U.S.-China competition. You know, he met with President Xi Jinping for over 4 hours on Wednesday, and he got 2 applause lines, and they were these. He said that the U.S. and China are going to be going forward, having better communication to avoid miscalculation. That got an applause. And then the other main applause line, a stable relationship, he says is good for the U.S. and China and for its global partners. So the president underscoring that the U.S. is still open for business from Pacific Rim nations and that the U.S. can still manage these crises on the conflict front while continuing to invest and be a good partner to businesses throughout this region.
Jessica also tells us about the rationale behind this Indo-Pacific economic framework, not including a trade pillar agreement. Listen in.
Yeah, I've been very curious about that question, and I've been talking to some CEOs here at the APEC CEO Summit about that very question. The president does get a lot of domestic pressure right now from his fellow Democrats about the free trade issue. The idea of exporting jobs is not popular in the Democratic Party. It's not popular, for that matter, in the Republican Party here in the United States. And so it is key for him to make the point that free trade does not mean exporting U.S. jobs, and his domestic Democrats at the same time have made it clear that if a trade pillar emerges from this IPEF negotiation, they feel it could cost him the election next year. And so we have seen that trade pillar, while a lot of work was done going into this conference, going into this summit, it has not emerged as an announceable, tangible outcome. And that was a great disappointment to some of the CEOs I spoke to. They said, look, we're in this agreement in part because we're looking for market access, and we need that in order to be incentivized to do more business with the United States. In the case of Indonesia and critical minerals, that's particularly poignant. I also spoke to a Malaysian the AmCham Malaysia CEO who told me, you know, look, I do think it's very key that IPEF has brought 14 economies together to talk about regulatory issues from the economy, the environment, the labor sector, and that all of these economies are in regular consultation for 18 months and getting to know each other, getting to understand what each other will and will not do, how to work together, particularly in the supply chain resilience outcome, which we saw in May. There's now an open communication mechanism for these countries to talk about supply chain resilience and warn each other of any problems in the supply chain. So a couple of different perspectives there, but still on the whole, these CEOs are looking for market access and are being told by the U.S. government that IPEF is the way to get it, that it is the mechanism going forward.